Hello, everybody. Welcome, my extraordinary friends. Thanks for those who are on Facebook Live and YouTube watching already while I fiddle with things. I'm so glad to be here with you today. I'm your host, Della Hill, for your extraordinary talk show. And before I start, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Excuse me. Everyone that's listening, everyone that's watching, everyone that has subscribed to the YouTube channel, and everyone that's messaged me or called me or come up to me in the store and said, "Hey, I really loved that last show you did." That means the world to me. My goal here is to reach one person. I figure if I come here and sit in this seat once a week and one person hears and it makes their day better or they learn something, then I've done my job. And that apparently at least one of you is listening. So I'm grateful for that. And if you feel like this is helpful to you, please comment, let me know. Or if you feel like it'll help somebody else, share it with them. But thank you so much for being here with me and sharing this with me and listening what I have to say. Like I always say, I don't expect you to believe me or anything I say just because I say it and because I'm sitting behind a microphone. This microphone does not mean I'm telling the truth. If you listen to me and you know inside or it resonates, then you'll know what's right. But I'm not here to tell you what to think. My goal here is to help you think for yourself. And I'm crossing my fingers that some of you are just crazy enough to think for yourself. So let's get to today's show. I'm so excited to share this one with you because this is something that is so valuable to me. And when I came to truly understand this concept, literally my life changed. So last week we talked about your relationship with your body. Today I want to introduce you to another part of yourself, another partner that you have, and that is your intuition. It's the voice that is inside you. It's the voice that you hear and you think it's your own thoughts, but it's not. It's kind of your own thoughts. But it really is more than that. Okay, remember, you are not a human having a spiritual experience. You are a spirit having a human experience. And that's really scary. Earth life is difficult. You know it. You've had difficulties already today. And you have that every single day. But the thing is, you're never, ever, ever alone. You have this voice that's there for you. It's part of you and it gives you advice. It helps you all the time. And you might know it, but you might not be very connected to it. You've probably heard of this before. If you've ever attended a Christian church, you've probably heard them talk about the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit or the still small voice. That's what I'm talking about. But you don't have to be Christian to have this. You don't have to go to church to have this. Everyone has this. Some of us are more in tune. Some of us are more in touch with it. And through my life, I've gone through times when I was like so tight with it and then where I wasn't paying attention at all. And I can tell you things go better when I'm paying attention. So some of the names that you might know or recognize, like I said, the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, the still small voice, you might also have heard it called guidance or higher self or inner voice or intuition. All of these things mean the same thing. It's the guidance that you have to help you get through Earth life because this life is hard and no one expects you to do it alone. The problem is we're not really taught well how to use our intuition, how to use that guidance. In fact, we're very often taught a myth, and I want to break this myth for you right now. I don't think that people mean to teach it this way, but it comes across, I know it was for me when I first learned about it at a Christian church. I felt like, and maybe my teacher said this, maybe they didn't, maybe it's just what I took on. I felt like I had to be really good in order to be able to hear my voice inside. I felt like I had to be doing all the things right. I had to be honoring my mother and father. I had to never argue with my brothers and sisters. I had to always be perfect in everything I do. And the thing is, that's not possible. And your inner voice knows that and doesn't expect you to be perfect, and it will still talk to you. There is no list of criteria that you must meet in order to hear your inner voice. If that's the only thing you take away from me today, please understand that. There is no criteria that you have to match or pass to hear your inner voice. If you are hearing me say this, if you're reading these words in caption and you're breathing, guess what? you have the criteria it takes to listen to this voice. In fact, you don't even have to be breathing because it speaks to you whether you're alive or whether you're not alive. That's another topic. We'll talk about more of that another day. You don't have to have this idea of worthiness. If you feel like, well, I know that it's there, but it's not going to talk to me because I'm not good enough, that is BS, and I'm calling it out. You can listen to this voice right now, all the time, every day. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you've done in your life. I don't care what you beat yourself up over. This voice doesn't care about that either. It loves you, and it wants to talk to you, and it wants to help you. That's what I'm here to tell you today. I want to tell you about a man that I know you've heard of if you live in America or most of the modern world, who not only believed in this voice, but he shared it with you in ways that you all have already heard of. The man I'm talking about is named Walt Disney. And if you've ever watched a Walt Disney movie, there's probably some reference to intuition in it. You heard of a character named Jiminy Cricket? He is the conscience, right? He's the little guy who sits on your shoulder. And you know, we always have this image of like the angel over here and the devil over here. The devil isn't really there. All you're really hearing is the angel. And you just got to listen to that one. The devil that you hear is in your own mind. That's your own ego speaking to you, trying to argue with the inner voice that you have. Okay, Walt Disney gave us Jiminy Cricket and Tinkerbell, and he wasn't the first person to give us these characters, but he shared them with us in a way that we can all understand. He also gave us fairy godmothers. I mean, he didn't give them to us, but he shared that concept with us to help us understand a little bit that we do have help. We do have guidance. We have this intuition. We have this voice inside of us that will talk to us. And one of the more recent shows that came out that was so clear about this was Moana. And I want to talk about Moana a little bit. Because if you've watched more than one of my shows or listened, I've talked about things like rules, and I've talked about finding your golden path. And Moana has all that down. Moana was this woman, young girl, who was surrounded by rules. And she lived in a beautiful, wonderful place where there was a ton of love. But there were also rules there that did not fit her. Specifically, don't sail anywhere. Don't leave the island. Don't ever leave. She knew. She was listening to her inner voice, and she knew that rule did not fit her. And she knew in order to follow her golden path, she had to break that rule. And sometimes that happens. She was a rule breaker, that's for sure. And she listened to her inner voice. And there's a line in this song from Moana, and it's the song Where You Are. And for most of the song, it's all the island people convincing her, this is great, this is awesome, we love it here, we have everything we need. Consider the coconuts, they give us everything. You don't ever need to leave because everything you need is right here. But there's one little voice that sings in that song, and he says, he's talking to Moana. He says, you are your father's daughter, stubbornness and pride. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, is he talking to me? Stubbornness and pride part might be a little bit. Mind what he says, but remember, you may hear a voice inside. And if that voice starts to whisper, to follow the farthest star, Moana, that voice inside is who you are. I just get tingles. That makes me so happy. In fact, when I first heard that line in the song, I had to rewind it about 10 times and listen to that over and over and over again. And that idea of the voice inside comes back again in the movie multiple times while she's learning from her grandmother and her ancestors how to follow her golden path. And it's a really, really beautiful thing. So if you watched my golden path video and you're like, okay, I still not sure how to go about this, listen to the voice inside. And it starts with baby steps. It really does, but you can get bigger and bigger and bigger. When it comes to listening to the voice inside, we sometimes think, okay, I can ask my guidance or my intuition or the Holy Ghost if a big thing is right, like who I should marry or where I should go to school or should I live here or here. So we think of it sometimes that we can use it for those big things. We forget we can use it for the little things. And that doesn't mean that we should make every single decision, should I wear socks or sandals today? Please don't wear both. Up to you. Totally up to you. The little things like that don't matter so much, right? But when it comes to the little choices in our everyday life that bring about our happiness or our unhappiness, that voice is there for us to listen to, even the little things. And that voice is probably nudging you and bugging you already, even if you don't know that it's there, even if you're not paying attention to it, because I guarantee you have it. There's a woman named Emily Fletcher who's wonderful. I recommend finding her on YouTube and looking her up. I'll post some of her videos in the comments or in the description. She refers to your intuition like this, which is similar to a different description we talked about last week. She says, let's say that your left brain, which is kind of your ego, what you might call the little devil on your shoulder, is maybe a computer, and it might be the best computer you can possibly buy. Top of the line, highest speed, all the memory, all the RAM, all the processing, everything that you can do. That's your left brain. Your right brain, your intuition, is like the modem, the internet signal. And whether or not you have a computer, that modem and internet signal is still there. Whether or not you're tuned into that internet signal doesn't matter because it's still there. But no matter how great your computer is, it's going to work way better if it's connected to the modem. So you have your left brain, and the problem with our left brain is that's the one that is trying to keep us alive. It's saying you have to keep your job so you can have money, so you can buy groceries, so you can pay your bills, so your family won't starve. And your right brain is the one that says, you don't have to do it that way. You could do this, or you could do this, and gives you other options. But because we have this core drive in us to be solid, be comfortable, have things around us that are familiar, we stick so hard to our left brain, and our left brain argues with our right brain. The right brain is where the voice comes in. That's where it talks to you. But the left brain says, no, 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 no. That's not logical. That's not reasonable. We have to do it this way. And most of the time, your left brain wins. Most of the time, my left brain wins. I'm certainly not a master when it comes to listening to my intuition or my higher self. I like to call it my higher self, and I actually have a name. I call her Big Della. She talks to me. She gives me ideas and suggestions. And in fact, she likes to play jokes on me because, and I'll explain that. It's like a riddle. When I ask a question of Big Della, I'll say, okay, how does this work? And then my answers sometimes come like a thought in my head where something I'm thinking that just makes sense. And it makes sense in a way that nothing else made before. And I go, oh, that's it. Thank you so much. Sometimes it's not that easy. What Big Della likes to do for me is put little clues out there and see how long it takes me to catch on. And chances are your higher self probably does something similar, because once you realize the signs, then you know that they're around you all the time and you just haven't been noticing. I'll give you an example of one that I had to figure out recently. Not very long ago, few months ago, I took a training course for Dolores Cannon's quantum healing hypnotherapy technique so that I could be a hypnotist and do hypnosis the same way that Dolores Cannon did. Now, Dolores Cannon was a master. She did hypnotism for over 45 years and developed her own process and procedure that is highly, highly effective. So I wanted to be as good as her. And the thing is, she's been doing this for 45 years. I haven't been doing it that long. So I knew I had a long way to go. And I would talk to Big Della and I would say, what can I do? How can I be better? How can I, as I'm doing these hypnosis sessions, how can I be the best? How can I be the most effective? How can I make sure that my clients get everything that they come to me for? And I would then meditate. And in my meditations, I would picture myself doing these hypnosis sessions and being very successful at it, which is another kind of visualization that we've talked about before. So I would do that. And then a weird thing happened. In my meditation, as I'm seeing my client and I'm seeing myself talking to them and I'm seeing myself going through all of the hypnosis session, in my meditation, instead of seeing myself doing it, I saw Dolores Cannon sitting in the chair where I was supposed to be sitting. And that was very confusing, and I didn't understand. It was very clear, but I didn't understand why. I didn't get it. And I got some other clues like this, and it one thing it did is it piqued my interest. I was like, okay, there's clearly a message here that I'm not getting. What's the message? And I kept looking and I kept asking. And then I was reading on the forum for the QHHT practitioners and advice and help and things like that. And one gentleman wrote that what his higher self had told him was, as he's doing the session, to imagine that he is Dolores, that he is Dolores Cannon sitting there by the side of the bed doing the hypnosis session. And I got it. I said, oh, I'm supposed to imagine that I'm Dolores as I do the session, because Dolores is the master. It will take me years and years to get as good at this as she is. But if I picture myself as her, try to do it exactly the way she would do it, then I can be better. And I can tell you that that technique of imagining myself as her has been very effective. And I've had some amazing, wonderful hypnosis sessions with my clients. So that was an example of how my higher self gave me a little bit of clues and pushed me until I got the right answer. And I feel like it's like a joke, because once I see all the clues together and I get it, then it's like figuring out a riddle. And I have a good laugh about it. And I feel like Big Della's laughing with me. So next, how do you do this? How do you look and find this for yourself if you don't already have it? You're probably going to guess the very first thing I'm going to tell you, because it's the same answer to how do you do everything that I've told you to do. And that is meditate. There's a lot of different ways of meditation, and there's no wrong way to meditate. One of my favorite ways to talk to my higher self is just to have a conversation. I do it in the car a lot. I talk to myself out loud. I talk to myself in my head. And there was several years, a long time, that instead of talking directly to what I saw as my higher self, in my head, I had a couple of good friends, people I actually know, people that I trust, people that I know will be honest with me, people I know will give me good advice. And I have these people kind of in my head, and I see them in my head and I think of them. And when I had a problem, I would have a conversation with this person in my head. You know, it wasn't the actual person, but I knew that they were people who would be honest with me and give me good advice and hold myself accountable. So I would picture these people and I would have a conversation with them. And I would ask them, how do I handle this? How do I address this situation? And I would hear in my head, I would hear my own friends' voices speaking back to me, giving me that advice. And sometimes they were not hard on me, but very honest with me. One thing I want you to understand, when you're talking to your higher self in your head, if your higher self, or if the voice that answers ever, ever, ever belittles you, puts you down, or treats you in any way that is anything but loving, that is not your higher self. Your higher self adores you. Your higher self loves you so much. And your higher self will be honest with you, meaning they will tell you, hey, that wasn't a very good idea to do that. You might have hurt that person. They will tell you, pay attention to this. You could probably improve in this area. That's part of their job, is to help make you better. So they will point out ways that you can improve, but they will never, ever, ever be hurtful to you. Anything that they say will be said in love. So the voices in your head that are speaking to you negatively, that is not your higher self. Those voices are lying. Kick them out. The one you want to listen to is the one that speaks in love. So as you are having those conversations in your head, as you're talking to yourself, and at first it feels like you're talking to your little self. And then as you go along, the more you do it, like everything else, like meditation and life, it takes practice. And sometimes we don't want to do the practice. We want to just go boom and have it big and have it there and hear hear all the advice and all the support and everything. And I'm sorry it doesn't work that way. Gardens don't grow in a day. Weeds do. Watch out for the weeds. But if you're going to plant your garden, it takes time. You have to fertilize it. You have to water it. You have to make sure you get the weeds out, and then it'll grow. So don't be hard on yourself when things aren't happening right away. If you're meditating and you're trying to find your golden path and you're trying to listen to your inner voice and you feel like you're blocked, be patient. Gardens don't grow in a day. It takes time for these skills to build. It takes time for these things to become comfortable. Once they get really comfortable, you're probably never going to get rid of it unless you make an effort to try. But it does take a little bit of while to get comfortable, to get used to it, and to start really recognizing it. As you're talking to yourself, as you're having these conversations in your head, and you might hear your own voice speaking back, kind of evaluate the things that you're hearing. Evaluate what is being told to you. And think, is that good advice? And your left brain is going to go, no, that's not good advice. Okay, stop that for a second and just evaluate. If I did this thing, how would that work? Is this something that feels good to me? And when you think that you're hearing your higher self, you can ask, hey, I think that was you. Was that you speaking to me? And you should get another affirmation, another something. Some of those signs, our higher self loves to give us signs, especially when we aren't hearing, when we're not listening well enough to really get the clear messages. We get a lot of signs. And that might be something that someone else says to you. You might ask your higher self a question, and then later that day, somebody says something to you that answers that question. And that other person had no idea that you asked your higher self that, but your higher self knew that was the perfect way to get an answer. One way that I have found many, many answers, and I know it sounds silly, but is on YouTube. If I'm on YouTube watching videos and I have a question in my mind and I've asked my higher self about it, more than once, many more than one time, the next video that was suggested or one on the suggested list jumped out to me. And when I watched that video, I got the answers I was looking for. It's shocked me sometimes how clearly the answer comes when you're open to it and looking for it. It's really quite amazing. I've told you guys a little bit of the story of how I found meditation, because I knew that there was more in my life that could be better. I could bring in better things. I just knew I was missing something. And there was a suggested video in my YouTube list for Vishen Lakhiani's 15-minute mind hack. And when I watched that video and I went home and meditated, and that day my life took a turn. And look where we are now. Now I'm talking to you on the radio and on YouTube. And I wouldn't be here if my intuition hadn't pushed that video at me over 2 years ago. That was a pretty big deal for me. Another time, and this was a long time ago and in a different manner. There was a time, it'll be 22 years ago, coming up in about 2 months. I had met this guy. I was pretty crazy about him, but we'd only known each other 5 weeks. Okay, we met on a blind date. And 5 weeks later, I told him, I think I wanted to marry you. We wanted to be sure, so we decided to pray about it. And we were very committed. We were really serious about this. And we decided to set aside a few days where this would be kind of our focus. And I thought maybe after day 3, maybe I'd get a clear message. But sorry, my nose is itching. On the very first day after I'd been focusing on this for about 24 hours, I was praying, and prayer and meditation, very similar. Some people say they're the same. You can argue, but anyway, I was praying, and I wasn't even looking for an answer yet. I was just talking about it. I said, hey, there's this guy. His name's Chris. I think he's really cool. I feel like I can be myself around him. And before I even got to asking a question, I started getting this feeling inside me, like in my stomach. And it felt like a warm balloon inflating. And I was like, whoa, okay, no. I haven't even asked a question yet. Let's start over. And I pushed that feeling away. And then I took a deep breath and I started praying again. And boom, it was back and bigger, even bigger than it was before. And it was so big, it caught me off guard. I don't know how to explain it except just this big, warm feeling just growing inside me that literally felt warm. And it felt like it was just spreading through my whole body. So I stopped and I went, oh, is this my answer? And boom, it got even bigger. And I was like, so I should marry this guy? And like, boom, it got even bigger. And I was like, okay, I got it. That message was clear. That was one of the clearest messages I've ever gotten in my life. That was almost 22 years ago. Chris and I have been married for 21 years. And that was one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. And I'm incredibly grateful that my intuition was like, not only yes, but yes. And I've never looked back. And I've never had to question that decision because I knew from the beginning that was exactly the right answer. And in fact, Chris is watching right now. And hi, babe. He's pretty wonderful. Another thing I want you to know is I'm not the only person talking about this, okay? Walt Disney got it. I'm talking about it. But if you look for intuition answers, if you want to learn more about your intuition, there are so many places you can look. I just went on YouTube and typed in The Voice Inside, and I got a ton of answers. Just on YouTube, not even Google. Including 3 songs by people that you may have heard of, either called The Voice Inside or The Voice Within or something like that. One of those is by Queensryche, which some of you, if you're closer to my age, might remember. Some of you younger kids may not know who that is. One is by a guy who was formerly known as Prince. He sang a song called The Voice Inside. And another one by Christina Aguilera. And I'm going to read you just one little part of this song. She says, when there's no one else, look inside yourself. Like your oldest friend, just trust the voice within. Then you'll find the strength that will guide your way. You'll learn to begin to trust the voice within. And she's totally right. So I recommend just pay attention because your intuition is already talking to you, whether or not you notice. And it's doing things like just pushing you or putting a little thought in your mind that you don't realize is from it that keeps going and rolling. I'll get there in just a sec. It's often very passive because it's there, it's talking to you already, even if you don't know it. So you may be responding to it already and you just don't know. And it's like a radio station before we had digital that you had to actually tune the dial to turn in. And the more you do that, the more you will get closer, get the message better, get the message clearer. I challenge you to talk to yourself. I challenge you to look for little signs, look for answers. And if you think you're imagining them, you're probably not. Those things are real. I want to share one more thing, my last thing, one of my all-time favorite poems from one of my all-time favorite poets. It's called The Voice. There is a voice inside you that whispers all day long, I feel that this is right for me, or I know that this is wrong. No teacher, preacher, parent, friend, or wise man can decide what's right for you. Just listen to the voice that speaks inside. That's by Shel Silverstein. Have an extraordinary week. I'll see you guys next week.